I call myself the unlikely rocket scientist. It happened, and it surprises me still to this day. I pinch myself, did I really do that? But yeah, it happened.
Welcome to the ENTJ podcast. I'm Dan, and today I'm with CoachB.
My first and last name and a lot of my nicknames start with a B. I decided to go with
just right
Coach
there
B.
on the hat. Yeah,
Just the B. There it is. Grew up in South Louisiana, went to college, somehow got a mechanical engineering degree, which in hindsight is kind of almost a miracle in my mind. And even more of a miracle, some kind of way, I ended up getting offers from the Kennedy Space Center and the Johnson Space Center.
Oh, wow.
And I landed here in Houston.
That's like Houston, we have a problem, Houston. Like, that's some serious stuff.
I spent about a quarter of a century or thereabouts, 24 years, as a flight controller and an engineer and an astronaut piloting technique designer. Then as kind of a project manager, that's where that ENTJ probably started to come into focus, and coordinating the trajectory design for all the phases of the space shuttle flights. And then I moved on into supervision, and then into kind of what I would call, I guess, macro process leadership. I left the space program whenever the space shuttle program was ended. That's almost 10 years ago, believe it or not. What the heck am I going to do now? And it had been floated to me by a few people that maybe executive and leadership coaching might be up my alley. Took a lot of training classes, and voila, now I'm Coach B.
I'm talking to you today because you're an ENTJ on the MBTI. How about you describe a little bit about your journey?
I was in my late 20s at the time. It's when I found out I was something called an ENTJ. There's something called feelings, and supposedly I suck.
What are those?
What are those? I'm one of those people where you're at the movie theater and people are crying when you're supposed to cry, and I'm looking at them like, how do they do that? I just wasn't very well developed from an emotional intelligence perspective. I had real good personality skills. I knew how to get along with people, and I think really good values and integrity and morals and all those types of things are drilled into me by my mother. Empathy, emotionality, being able to understand how other people process life and information, it was real foreign to me, and I couldn't compute it. That kind of launched me into really doing a lot of work related to FI, as we know it now, introverted feeling. I make up terms from time to time. NASA had a lot of acronyms, so I can't help myself. So if you'll pardon me, I have an expression I call midlife FI catch-up. I can just see a bunch of different phases where things got turned on, so to speak. It takes us a while to get there. At each stage of our life, I kind of consider there's so much cognitive function oxygen available. And so with us, those first 2 or 3 functions are stealing all the cognitive function oxygen out of our persona. But that FI is in that 4 slot. They call it the inferior, the aspirational, or whatever you want to call it. And it's just not getting fed and cared for naturally. The extroverted thinking, which we have as our dominant function, and that's that kind of like project manager, go get it done, efficiency, effectively thing. That's like a faucet that's always turned on. It's transparent to us. We don't even realize how other people see that in us. But that FI is on that same spine, and I think it's all about balancing you out, rounding you out. Maybe share some oxygen and develop that pathway.
So the FI midlife catch-up, all the cognitive functions can grow. There's oxygen out there, but it depends if you're feeding it or not. I can definitely relate to being completely blindsided when people have gotten upset with me. And it often doesn't come out in a direct way. And perhaps it's experiences like that repeatedly that tell the ENTJ, hang on a minute, something's up here.
Once I left the space program and opened this Cognitive Skills Development Center, which is a franchise that I basically call the Learning and Habituation Center, to try to help people, right? I found out that despite the fact that everybody always told me, you'd be a great salesperson, you'd be great in marketing, I got a big F in sales. And I'm sitting across the table from mostly mothers with children in their elementary and junior high school. And these folks were struggling in school. An educational psychologist, former special education teacher, came by the center one day, and I'm struggling trying to drum up some business. She wanted to help me. She kind of became an angel to me. So she sat in on a consultation with me, with some clients. And then she sat out and she said, Brian, I don't know how else to tell you this. I'm just going to tell you. You come across too smart, too well-spoken, and too confident, and you're intimidating the hell out of the moms. Well, if that's not an ENTJ trait, intimidation, I don't know what is. And what I realized was that my FI was weak. In the space program, it was survival for me. You know, I really don't think I was up to the task compared to a lot of my peers. They were a lot brighter than I was, just frankly speaking, academically for sure, and in many areas. So guess what I did? I became smart, or at least come across as smart, well-spoken, and confident, because that was the key to not getting ripped to shreds and to get your procedure approved, in which I had great success at, you know, close to 50 different flights with the space shuttle, with a procedure that I either led the design on or shared in designing. Well, that came from those presentations and that persuasion capacity. But then in that forum where I'm sitting across the table with a mother of a child, they weren't interested in whether I was smart, well-spoken, and confident about being able to help their child. They were interested in, what is my emotional expression? Do I have warmth? That was the big, shining, bright light that finally shook me up. Wow, was that a hard lesson? But on the good side, it launched me into a lot of things related to what I help people with now as a coach.
The expression of an ENTJ, perhaps internally, they might consider themselves quite generous. They might consider themselves quite kind. They really do want the best for people. And TE is, hey, I want to help you with the best way to do this. You're saying there's a disconnect, perhaps, with what's going on internally inside the ENTJ's mind and how others are experiencing them because of their weaker FI.
I could not even come close to counting how many times I've met people in various phases of life, and especially with females, okay? And they've come up to me after knowing me for a little while, and the arm goes like here, and they tell me the following: you are so much different than I thought you were. That empathy inside is cognitive for us as a generalized way of putting it.
Yeah.
It doesn't leak into our body. TENI. It's like overpowering to some people. It's intimidating. And you have no awareness that that's going on because you're driven for purpose, effectiveness, efficiency. You might interrupt people in conversations unknowingly because let's get to the thing that matters.
I understand what you're saying. Let's get onto it.
Right. In these conversations where I met someone, they thought I was a, you know, that's another B word. All right. There's more sides to B than just the positive side, right? Let's be effective. Let's be efficient. Let's knock it out. We got to go. We have many things to do. But you carry that into other aspects of life, and you're shooting yourself in the foot.
I can 100% relate to what you're saying. Yeah, hand on the shoulder. You are totally different to what I thought of you. And that's a positive thing that they're saying. Not exactly. It's like, I thought you were a jerk when I first met you. But now I understand that there's a heart behind this person. And it's always confusing to me. Because it's like, I haven't changed. I'm not doing anything differently. It's only your understanding that's changed. Perhaps there's a shared set of nonverbal cues that FI or F users or anyone who doesn't have it in last position has as like a common language that I'm just completely oblivious to.
Body language, you know, is there a disconnect there? And that tends to be, I think, what happens with a lot of us. Catch how your body posture is, because it'll even change the pace and the depth of your voice. So your countenance, your expression, you know, lessen that gap between what you know yourself to be and your soul, your values, your integrity, your compassion. You have cognitive empathy, but the affect, the emotionality, it's not getting expressed in your body adequately. There's another thing I'm going to leverage off the NASA experience. You know, there's this big award called the Silver Snoopy, and I'm going to use that as an example. It affects all types, but I think it might affect ENTJ people the most. This little pendant that you would get if you got this award. Once people kind of like arrived and got the validation, getting a big, significant award, I noticed a shift and they were a lot easier to work with and deal with. And I imagine that probably happened with myself too, as I got a few awards along the way. We have this compulsion inside of us to do grand, big things. That's that extroverted thinking, that confidence, that's NI projection to the future. We can do this. You know, once you get your silver Snoopy moment, I think it opens up more oxygen, to use that term again, for you to start to maybe back off of this intimidating, overly forward focused, overly worried about achieving type of energy that we tend to have that turns people off. Hey man, you've checked off enough boxes. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You don't have to prove yourself to yourself anymore. And that's the key.
I think it's an identity thing, perhaps. I want to be successful. I am successful. And I'm not going to stop until I get that recognition. And there's that, it's been about a year now since I've been in Sweden. And when I first started, I guess I didn't have my silver Snoopy. I needed to show people who I was, or I needed to I guess, conform to my identity. And that silver Snoopy moment, as you've put it, I can definitely relate to that. I think there was a recognition, a private word from the principal to me. He said something very positive. And I felt like I'd become accomplished in that moment. And I could relax then because I've established myself now. My reflection and the advice that you've mentioned is maybe don't be so intense in pursuing that silver Snoopy, because you might end up hurting yourself along the way. So I think a much more eloquent way of saying it is, I think Jordan Peterson was the one who talked about it like a sword. And the sword's there, it's sheathed. The ENTJ can wield that sword, but you've got to know the right moments to go full TE mode.
One of my personal heroes is my great uncle, who was at Iwo Jima. He was a World War II person, and I inherited his Marine sword. It's actually right behind me, it's in its sheath.
Do you want to show me that sword? I'm interested. I want to see the sword.
My great uncle, he was my hero. He died. He was 98 years old, sharp as a tack. Here's a picture of him.
Wow.
From his days. Uncle Cliff was his name. Yeah, this is his
Marine sword.
His Marine sword, and it's sheathed.
The context of Jordan Peterson using it was actually Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and humility. And it was, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Someone who was meek was not someone who was weak, but it was someone who had this power about them, had this ability, this TE ability in this context for this metaphor, but kept it sheathed.
A space shuttle launch is kind of like meek to me. And that might be really weird, because meek to me is power under control, right? I mean, it's magnificent power. There's a lot of ways things could go wrong, but when the guidance is working and what we call eye loads were right, and the ascent profile was designed right, and the atmosphere is right, and all that stuff, it's immense power, but very controlled and poised and elegant. The sword inside the sheath, the gun in the holster, the space shuttle under control, that's meek with strength that is reined in and is poised, is elegantly implemented. I call it elegant power. So I like what you have to say there.
I would think the ENTJ would be so good at FI, because our whole conversation has been surrounded by FI chat. It's like, you guys are obsessed with what you're not good at.
We have a strong proclivity. I would call it, we're hell-bent, right, on achieving. And again, it's back to that spreading the oxygen.
That's just where we're bad at. That's what we need to
and part of achievement in that proclivity is we're extremely oriented towards what you name your channel after, personality growth. We are hell-bent on growth and development. We don't mind being wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't see that about us.
Yes. What resources would you say, if someone wanted to explore this more deeply, would be very helpful?
I do happen to have a few resources that I would recommend. Two books in particular. For my emotional intelligence training, which I administer to my client, this book comes with that training. It's called the EQ Edge, the Emotional Intelligence and Your Success. But there's something I'm really partial to, and I took this guy's class. His name is Dan Newby, and he wrote a book which I kind of consider basically the dictionary of emotions, where you pick an emotion maybe a day, and you study what it's all about, what its etymological background is, what does it mean to you and your mind and your body in terms of it's a predisposition to act, which is basically what an emotion is. What if you were the one that did all the stuff you're going to do on automatic pilot anyway. But you complemented that by being ahead of the curve in this elegance, in this emotional intelligence. There's going to be some people noticing that about you. We're going to be more effective leaders. We're going to be more effective people. We're going to live more meaningful, purposeful, productive, and enjoyable existences. What more would you want than that?